I had no idea that freeing a jaguar from a trap deep in the Amazon would be the decision that haunted and then saved my life exactly 1 year later. My name is Renata, and for the past 6 years, I've been working as a wildlife biologist along the flooded forests of the Rio Jaruá, a place where the river thinks for itself and the jungle keeps its own time. That morning started like any other, until it didn't. It was early April, just before the rains turned serious. I remember the air was already thick, the kind of thick that sits in your chest and makes every breath feel like work. I was alone, about 3 kilometers from base camp, checking camera traps we'd placed along a known Jaguar corridor. My field assistant, Diego, had stayed back with a fever. I told him I'd be quick. I almost wasn't quick enough. I heard it before I saw it, a low, broken sound that didn't belong to anything I recognized. Not a call, not a warning, something worse, something tired. I pushed through a curtain of heliconia and stopped completely still. She was caught in a wire snare, the kind poachers set for peccaries, but that take anything that steps wrong. The wire had bitten into her right foreleg, just above the paw. She was young, maybe 3 years old, probably 70 kilos, and she was lying on her side in the mud, breathing hard, watching me with eyes that had already passed through panic and arrived somewhere else entirely. I want to tell you I acted with perfect calm. I didn't. My hands were shaking when I reached for my pack. I had a wire cutter. I always carried one after a coati incident 2 seasons back. But the distance between me and that animal was maybe 4 meters. 4 meters from a jaguar in pain is not a distance, it's a dare. I started talking. I don't even know what I said. Something low and steady. Not words, really, just sound. I've read that it helps. I wanted to believe it did. I took one step, then another. She lifted her head and I stopped breathing entirely. She didn't lunge, she watched me. I crouched down slowly, making myself smaller, less vertical, less threatening, and I kept moving toward her. Every cell in my body was telling me to run. My brain was doing calculations it had no business doing, but her breathing, that broken, exhausted breathing, kept pulling me forward. There was a moment, about 2 meters away, where I stopped completely. Not because I chose to, because my legs simply refused. I looked at her and she looked at me, and the forest went absolutely quiet around us. No birds, no insects, nothing. Just the 2 of us and the sound of her breathing and the wire digging into her leg. I think that silence was the most terrifying thing I've ever experienced, and also, somehow, the most sacred. I made myself move. When I reached the wire, my fingers were so slick with sweat, I almost dropped the cutter. The snare had tightened with her struggle. I could see the damage, raw, deep, the kind of wound that would go septic out here within days. I got the cutter into position. She turned her head and looked directly at me, and I have never in my life felt so completely seen. I pressed the cutter. The wire was tougher than I expected. Old, rusted, coiled tight. I had to reposition twice. Each time I moved my hands, she tensed, and each time she tensed, I stopped, and we held that strange negotiation in the mud until finally I found the right angle and put everything I had into it. The wire gave. She didn't move immediately. I scrambled back, heart slamming, and waited. For almost a full minute, she just lay there. Then, slowly, she rose. She tested the leg, gingerly at first, just the tip of her paw touching the ground, deciding how much weight it could hold. Then she stood fully. She shook herself once, the way a dog shakes off water, and something about that gesture, so ordinary, so animal, broke something open in my chest. She turned her head and looked at me one more time. I will never be able to fully describe what that look was.
It wasn't gratitude. I'm a scientist, I know better than to project. But it wasn't nothing either. It was recognition, a kind of registration, as if she was filing something away. Then she walked into the forest and was gone in 3 seconds. The undergrowth swallowed her completely, and the birds came back, and the insects came back, and the world resumed as if nothing had happened. I sat in the mud for a long time after that. I didn't write anything in my field notebook. I just sat.
I reported the snare to the environmental agency, filed the paperwork, tagged the location, did everything I was supposed to do. Life moved forward. The rains came, the river rose, Diego recovered. We broke camp in June, and I went back to the city, back to the university, back to grant applications and data, and the slow, grinding work of trying to protect a place that most people will never see. I didn't think about her every day, but I thought about her. I thought about her when I was writing reports at 2 in the morning and couldn't remember why any of it mattered. I thought about her when a colleague told me our funding might be cut, and I had to smile and say we'd find another way. There's a particular kind of exhaustion that comes from fighting for something invisible to most people. A forest, a species, a corridor of land that doesn't appear on any map that matters to anyone with money. On the worst days, she was the thing I came back to. That look, that negotiation in the mud, the proof that it was real, that the work pointed at something real. April came around again. I was back on the Jaguar, same corridor, different season. This time I had a full team: Diego, a veterinary intern named Priya, and a local guide named Sue Benedito, who'd lived on that river for 60 years and claimed he'd seen everything. I would soon test that claim. We were 3 days into a camera trap rotation, pushing deeper than we usually went, following a signal from a collared male we'd been tracking for months. The forest was different that far in, older, quieter, the kind of place where the light comes down in columns and you feel like you're inside something that's been alive since before your country existed. Sue Benedito stopped walking first. He didn't speak. He just put his arm out and we all went still. Ahead on the trail, maybe 30 meters, a group of men were moving fast through the undergrowth, 4 of them. They weren't researchers. They had the wrong kind of gear and the wrong kind of quiet. The quiet of people who don't want to be heard. We stepped off the trail without speaking. Diego pulled Priya behind a fallen trunk. I pressed myself against a Brazil nut tree, so wide it could have held 5 of us. Sue Benedito was already invisible. I don't know how he does it, but he does. The men passed us within 10 meters. One of them was carrying something over his shoulder. I didn't let myself look too long. I could hear my own pulse. I focused on a patch of moss near my boot and breathed through my nose and told myself to stay completely still. Priya's hand found my arm in the dark of the undergrowth and gripped it. I didn't pull away. We stood like that, 4 people pressed into the forest, not moving, barely existing, while the men moved past us like something the river had pushed downstream. When the sound of them faded, no one moved. We were calculating how far to base camp, what direction they were heading, whether they'd seen us. The calculus of vulnerability runs fast in your brain when you're deep in the forest with no cell signal and no backup. Then everything shifted. A sound came from the canopy to our left, low, resonant, the kind of sound that reorganizes your internal organs, a jaguar's contact call. Not a threat, but unmistakably present. The men stopped. We could hear them talking in low, urgent voices. Then we heard something else, something crashing through the understory in the direction of the men, fast and heavy, circling wide. The voices rose, scrambling. One of them shouted something I couldn't make out. More crashing, then nothing. Silence. We waited 8 full minutes. I counted. When we finally moved, we followed Sue Benedito back toward the river at a pace I won't call walking. We didn't stop until we reached the boat.
Later that night, back at camp, with the generator running and the radio on, So Benedito looked at me across the camp stove and said something in the particular Portuguese of the river, blunt, old, no decoration. He said, "That cat wasn't hunting, she was working." I didn't answer him. I didn't know what to say. But here is what I know. I know that Jaguar corridor. I know the movement patterns, the territorial ranges, the way individuals behave when threatened versus curious. What happened that afternoon didn't follow any of the behaviors in my dataset. What I also know is this: the wire snare I had removed exactly 1 year before, in almost exactly the same location, was the same type used by that group of poachers. Was it her? I can't prove it. No tag, no collar, no camera trap confirmation. Science doesn't run on what I felt in my chest when that call came through the trees. Science runs on data. But So Benedito has 60 years on that river, and he wasn't asking a question. He was making a statement. I think about that look she gave me, lying in the mud, in pain, watching me come toward her with shaking hands and a wire cutter I almost dropped. I think about what it costs an animal like that to hold still, to let something happen that every instinct screams against. I also think about what it cost me to keep moving toward her, to override every signal my body was sending. We were both doing something unnatural that morning. We were both choosing something we couldn't fully explain. Maybe that's the only honest thing I can say about it. Maybe that's all it was: a territorial animal, a coincidence of timing, a story I built from fear and relief. Or maybe the forest keeps its own accounts, and some debts get paid in ways that don't fit in a field notebook. I'll let you decide.